Welcome to Missionary Roundtable with your host, Kale Horvath.
Hey guys, welcome back to Missionary Roundtable. My name is Kale Horvath. I'm a pastor and a missionary, and this is the Missionary Roundtable podcast, the podcast where we talk about the Great Commission and international missions and how we can do a better job of taking part in that. Today, I'm very excited to have back on the podcast my friend, dear friend, and missionary to Ecuador, Will Lyon. Now, you're going to see in just a second that when the Zoom call started with Will, I had it recording already. Usually, I do a little bit of intro with the whoever I'm interviewing and just tell them where I'm thinking about going, what kind of questions I want to ask. But I've known Will for a long time, and he's done an episode every single season of Missionary Roundtable, and so we hadn't talked for a while, really, since the last season. So I was like, you know what? We're just going to catch up candidly over this conversation while recording, and he was up for the challenge. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. If you haven't listened to one of Will's previous podcasts, you should definitely pause this and go back and listen to either season 1 or season 2's episode so that you can know more about his ministry and what he does. But I really think that you're going to enjoy the different stuff that we get into, or at the very least, maybe you'll glean some things during my therapy session, if you will, as I'm asking Will different questions throughout this episode. So I think you guys will like this one. Have fun. Enjoy.
Morning, brother.
William Lyon, what's up?
Good evening.
My dude, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing wonderful.
Man.
How about you?
I'm doing great, dude. And I'm already recording.
Nice.
I'm serious, because I'm like, listen, I have no notes. Right before I sent you this link, I wrote 3 phrases down, and I'm like, this is the new thing, Will. We talk once a year, we catch up, and we record the conversation, and maybe there's a couple people who actually think it's interesting.
Right.
Because it's like, I did this with somebody else already for this season. Like, I hadn't seen them in a long time, obviously. And so, they picked up. We're like, dude, how's it going? We had like a 20-minute conversation. I was like, man, that was really good. We should have been going. Now we got to fake that again.
Right.
But no, dude, seriously,
Right.
Thank you so much for taking the time. It's a joy as always to talk to you.
I appreciate it, Kale. Man, it's good to see you again.
Yeah.
I appreciate you thinking of me again.
Oh, of course.
And looking forward to catching up with you.
So how are you guys doing on the field right now? Just your family and your kids and yeah, what's going on with you guys just in your personal life?
Yeah, we are doing well as a family. God continues to bless, and our boys are growing up fast.
Man,
my
I've
oldest son
seen
is
that on Facebook, man.
crazy.
They're getting older and taller.
Right. Yeah, my oldest son is 14. He's about my same height now.
Wow.
And then youngest son is 11, Levi. He's growing, man. They love the Lord, and I see they're both kind of turning into their own personality and learning how to serve the Lord with the talents that He's given them. And
Mm-hmm.
our youngest one is really getting into music.
Oh, no way.
Loves guitars. He's already leading the worship at our church. And
Oh, man, that's cool.
my oldest son is all into everything electronic. He loves to fix
Okay.
broken computers, and he's getting into making videos and things like that now. And so the Lord's blessing him. We're all doing well as a family. My wife's doing well.
Good.
She's got a lot of great opportunities in ministry down here. The longer we're here, the more open doors we get for ministry.
Yeah.
The more people trust us, and the more they open up to us. And so recently, my wife's had a real great opportunity to reach out to quite a few ladies. And so everything's going well. Praise the Lord.
That's all. Well, it sounds
How about
like
you
you're
guys?
growing a little ministry team. You've got the tech,
Right.
social media guy. You've got the worship leader. I mean, that's really cool, man.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, man, we're doing good. I've actually, one of the things I jotted down that we'll get to later is because I feel like every time we do these, obviously it's a podcast episode, so I'm trying to get like good content for the audience, but it's more like I love picking your brain for me. And so I'm going to be super selfish and just be like, hey man, this is where we're at now. We are at the recording of this a year and a half in since we left home, which is crazy because the first time I talked to you for season 1, we were stuck at home on deputation, COVID hit, and we didn't know when we were going to get to the field. And so, wow,
I remember that.
what a whirlwind 3 years can be in your life if you're following God. It can be
Right.
crazy, man.
Absolutely. I agree.
But man, I just saw on Facebook like a couple days ago that you guys had some sort of marriage conference thing. Can you get into that? That looked I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been a long time coming. Kichwa ministry is very different, very slow.
Well, you're doing village.
We have to take our time.
So for anyone who's
Right.
listening to this as their first introduction to you, you really should pause this and go back and listen to the first episode in season 1 and then second in season 2. But Will does village ministry in Ecuador, and not a lot of guys are doing village ministry because it's. I mean, we even teach in seminary to start in the cities, but God has just opened so many open doors for you guys.
Right.
How many years
Right.
is this in the making now? When did I can't remember? Has it been like 12 years since you landed?
Right. Yeah, we're on the field now. 12 years.
12 years, man. Praise God.
12 years now. Yeah, God's been good. We like you're talking about the last 3 years, what it's been like, and how it's just amazing to look back and see how far God has brought you in such a short amount of time. We feel that all the time. We just can't believe everything that God has done, and really how long it's been already. Just the time flies, and God does so much. As far as the marriage conference goes, it was a real blessing. We have been, over the last probably 4 years, we've been given some great opportunities to do marriage counseling, premarital counseling, things like that. It's basically non-existent. People don't know what that is really here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a new concept. We've been trying to lay the groundwork for that. And, God's given us a lot of great opportunities there, been able to help some families, praise the Lord. We've seen some great things happen. And what has happened now is that people have taken notice of these families. People have noticed that there's something different and something's going on with all these different families. And people started making the connection that there's a biblical foundation worth pursuing there in as far as a marriage goes. Families are broken here, just like anywhere else in the world. It looks a lot different here, but it's the same story. And so the Lord's given us a lot of great opportunities to lead people to the Word of God and show them biblical principles for marriage and parenting, things like that. And so as a result of the last few years, several people came together and they said, hey, we need to, a lot of the new believers, a lot of believers who were already believers when we came here, they came together and basically said, hey, we need to get together and invite everybody we can and do this as a public thing and teach as many people as we can in a large setting.
And you got to love when it's like they're the ones who are like, hey, we got to do this. I mean, because at the beginning, you're the one saying we need to do this to everything. And then, man, once it makes that transfer, they're like, man, this is what our community needs. That is so cool.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's the most exciting thing as a missionary when you start to see that happen. We know, we're in this for life, but we know our life is a vapor. And we know that we are very fragile here as far as foreigners go. Mean, the government could, make a decision tomorrow that would limit or even end our ministry here. And so we're always looking for that, just like any missionary would be. We're always looking for that, those open doors that God gives us to put things in people's hands. And that's what happened with the marriage conference. They came to us. In fact, they weren't even going to have me do it. They were going to have me teach a part of it, and then they were going to look for some other guys maybe they could invite from some of the big cities to come and help as well. And anyway, that ended up falling through, so I ended up doing the whole thing.
Plan B,
it was plan B. Made me feel real good. But I was thankful, like you said. I'm thankful that they're moving forward in some ways even without me, and that's really exciting.
So was it like a multiple day conference, or just like a big long Saturday or Sunday kind of thing?
It was 2 days, like a Friday afternoon and then all day Saturday.
Nice. And how many people ended up coming, do you think?
Somewhere in the range of about 100 to 120.
No way. Man.
Yeah, it was
that is
a good
awesome.
crowd.
So that many people who were interested. I mean, they weren't coming because you were handing out free food and then doing marriage stuff. It's like they were there because you were doing a marriage conference.
Exactly.
Man,
We we avoid giving out stuff like the plague because, I mean, if we give stuff out, everybody comes. And so
Right.
there's a fine line there. You have to balance as a missionary. You want them to come in here, but at the same time, you want them to come for the right reason. And so the Lord really blessed, and it was I'd say about a third of them were existing believers that we've been working with for a long time. Maybe another, third to a half were new believers that have been saved over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And then there was a good crowd of unbelievers as well, people who openly reject Christ, but with a lot of marriage problems and a lot of family problems. And so there was something about that was attractive to them that they wanted to hear. And so we intertwined the gospel, obviously, all throughout all the teaching and everything we did. And so it was a great opportunity.
Man, that's awesome. And was it something, obviously you were encouraged just because it happened and people came, but so the guys, whoever the leaders were who were proposing, like, hey, this is what we need to do, did they feel encouraged afterward as well?
They did. I met with some of them afterwards, and they're super excited because one of the things we set up was we wanted to be able to offer counseling, but obviously we couldn't do it right then and there. So we set up a way for them to basically request counseling in the future. Okay. And so we were given a pretty good list of people who wanted basically ongoing help. And the village where we chose to do the conference in is not the village where I'm currently church planning. It's a village that I've already worked in, and we've established elders and leaders here. And so those leaders are the ones that are moving forward now with those new contexts.
Very cool.
And so I think we'll see the fruit for that for quite a while.
That's awesome. Were they all currently married people, or was there young people just interested in marriage, or was it like all like mostly married couples?
It was a mix.
Okay.
I'd say mostly married, but then there were some teenagers in there, some young people, and it's funny. We actually had several people who were families who were actually in adultery right now, and both sets of families were in there. We had a few that were divorced, and both sides, of the family were there. So yeah, there was a big mix.
Man, well, in a 2-day conference, like, so you say marriage conference, and if I'm in my American ministry mindset, I'm like, okay, I think I know, what kind of big topics we'd hit or whatever at whatever session. But you're talking like, okay, we got unmarried people, we got unsaved people, we got mixed marriages, we got adulterous relationships. How do you pick what, like, because you kind of gotta hit a little bit of everything, but like the core is, well, how do we fix your marriage relationship, whether you're married or not, or unsaved or not, or in adultery or not? It's like you got to get right with the Lord, whether that means getting saved or whether that means you are saved and you need to figure out the duties and responsibilities of a husband or a wife biblically. So it's like the root that needs to be established, but then, man, that branches off into so many side stories. Was it difficult, or did you just like trust God that, like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and just hope that we hit enough people?
Right. Yeah, it was very difficult in the planning stages, because I was really just relying on the Lord to show me, because like you said, there's a million different ways you can go, and the only option is to hit a grand slam. I mean, you got to hit them all. There's no other choice.
We have to win the whole thing, man.
Right. That's how we went into it. And so we basically we took what we believed were the biggest biblical principles that would specifically touch the culture. We know what the biggest issues are here. And so we focused on 4 main topics. One of them was marital intimacy. And that was funny. It's a very cold culture. Husbands and wives here don't hold hands. They would never in a million years say, I love you in front of anyone. Very, very cold. Wow. I've never seen a Kichwa couple kiss except at a wedding.
In that part of the world, like, anytime I think of like Mexico, Central America, South America, I always think like super warm cultures, like touchy-feely, inviting, welcoming. Whether it's sincere or shallow, it's just that seems to be the theme that people think of. That surprises me.
Exactly. Yeah, to tell you the truth, you're right. Once you go down into the cities and you get into that culture, it's because of the culture up here in the mountains. In the village culture, it's different here. Okay. That's the difference.
Interesting.
And so, like, if you go down to the capital city, of course, it's that way. Everybody hugs and kisses on the cheek, and so it's very different. But when we touched that topic, they had never heard anything like that publicly, and it was amazing. Some of the questions we got. like one of the things I simply tried to establish is that this is God's plan for marriage, and it's His idea. It's
Yeah.
all in His hands. It's actually good.
Like He made it.
And I mean, it just blew people's minds.
Wow.
It just the only thing they've ever been able to associate marital intimacy with is sin. It's just bad. That's all. That's the only context they have.
Sure.
And so it was amazing. One lady asked, she said, if marital intimacy is not a sin, then why were Adam and Eve punished? And those are the kind of questions people get here. I mean, it's just completely new to them. They had never heard it before.
Bro,
and
you know what?
It was a real blessing.
Like, so the stage of ministry that we're at, I'll give you a quick update because we literally didn't, like, whoever's listening to this, Will said, hello, man. I had hit record before he was in the Zoom chat. So, like, they're actually, he's probably the only guy this season I'm going to do this to. I feel kind of bad now. But just as a little, like, update, like, the first year we were on the field was very, well, it was strange because of COVID for sure. The first 6 months, there wasn't much of anything other than language learning and trying to adapt to. There wasn't much adapting. It was winter and it was cold and everything was shut down. So, it's like, the first 6 months were weird. Then it opened up, but the first year in its entirety was very slow going, very single focused. Like, God gave me a vision, focus on language learning and building relationships, seeking men. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And the people part wasn't coming very fast, and my Western American mindset was like, man, I got to start seeing some results. That's immediately what you start thinking. Like, I got to justify why I'm over here, man. But God just kept teaching me. Like, every time I would, like, think of something in my brain, like, maybe I should try this, and I'd go before the Lord and ask Him, and it was like Psalm 27:14, wait on the Lord, wait, I say on the Lord. Like, it was just always Him saying, wait, just chill, dude, calm down. And I learned a lot about just waiting on the Lord in that year. And so at the beginning of this year, I started just fasting and praying for a little while, just looking for vision for this coming year. And man, I can't tell you how quickly the floodgates started opening. It's not like we have like 100 people all of a sudden, but it's like all of a sudden people started coming out of the woodwork, or people we were touching base with started asking more questions, or we started building more relationships. And then it was like mid-January that these things started coming in, and now it's like I'm busy, man. And it's awesome. It's exciting. It's what I want to be. But it's still the foundational stage. We don't have a church yet. It's going to be a minute until we get an actual church. I'm not rushing. If I've learned anything from God in the last 3 years, it's like, don't get trigger happy on God. Just follow Him, trust Him. I say all that to say, man, so you were talking about teaching these people who had never heard anything like that. And like, I'm discipling a guy right now who's a new Christian. We've been studying the Bible with some girls who are Christians, but very young, don't know much of anything. And we're friends with some other people who are lost, and it's awesome. But man, when you start talking about God or teaching the Bible to people who weren't raised in any church context, they don't know anything. And it is so refreshing. It's so much fun, man, because like, I just think back to doing ministry in America, and everybody has a preconceived notion about something, regardless of whether they're saved or not. It's just whatever culture or home they grew up in. It's just being in America, you probably have heard something, and you start talking to these guys about this concept, or I'm trying to think of a specific example. I can't off the top of my head, but I remember just recently talking to my wife about, Bible study or something I was doing with somebody, and it was just blowing their mind, dude, simple Bible truths. And it was just so exciting. And I think that's the part about missions that is simultaneously incredibly difficult, because you are starting from scratch every time. If you're doing it right, if you're not building on another man's foundation, you're starting from scratch every time. But that's also like such a joy, because I don't know how else other than international foreign missions you can experience that. I'm sure there's places in America where you can, but as a whole, unless you go to the foreign mission field, you just don't experience that as often. And that has been something that's been very exciting and encouraging and challenging at the same time, because you also have to like, you have to know how fast to go with people, especially when it comes to like they're learning, and then, okay, when do I call out sin? when do I, you know what I mean? Because you're trying to
Right,
teach them
right,
how to get saved before you're teaching them how to be a legalist. You know, like you're
right,
trying to lead them and
right.
parent them. And sorry, that was a long ramble, but it just like what you said about how they just don't know anything. It's like that's kind of been my
Hmm.
world the last 6 months, and it's been
Hmm.
super exciting and equal parts challenging at the same time. Do you
Hmm.
remember those? I mean, I guess you're still in it, obviously, but do you remember those foundational
Right.
years in the ministry in the Kichwa villages?
Oh, absolutely. You said it exactly right. It's full of challenges, but at the same time, it's so exciting. And I think God allows both of those emotions just to keep us going, keep us humble
Mm,
and
mm,
and at the same time keep us moving forward.
yeah.
We uh we love that. We wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. Our life is just wrapped up with people right now who are very new, like you said, they're just very, very new. And so everything is completely foreign to them. And of course, it affects your discipleship. It affects how you evangelize. You don't
Yeah.
start with Jesus loves you. Obviously, there's a lot of
You
groundwork that
start
needs
with
to be
God
laid.
exists, you know?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly
absolutely.
where we start. We start with explaining what is this book in my hand, and then we go into
Mm-hmm.
the first words are in the beginning, God.
Absolutely.
And so that's where we have to start.
Amen.
And we love it. It's really exciting. And as far as your preaching, for example, when you get the church off the ground, get it
Mm,
going for the first time, it's full of new believers. It's full of
mm.
people who have no idea.
So you have to pick
And
your books and passages and topics
oh yeah, you got
strategically.
to be careful. You got to be very careful. Teach it in such a way where they're getting the big picture first.
Hmm.
And like it's little things that I learned at the beginning. For example, I'm used to in a sermon, say I'm preaching the New Testament and I just mentioned something about Abraham,
Yeah,
and I
you
can
don't
mention
go
that in
there.
passing.
You don't even address the
Right,
verse. You just
right. Everybody
mention.
knows, everybody
Yeah,
understands.
yeah.
And I do that here, and it's just,
They're like, whoa, whoa,
they're
whoa,
lost.
wait a second.
What are you talking
What was
about?
that last thing? Can we stop there
Right,
for a second?
right. Who's that guy? And
Yeah,
so it slows me down in preaching because then we're
sure.
like, if I really need to talk about Abraham, it's all right. Let's go to Genesis. Let's read these verses again,
Hmm.
and then we'll go back to the New Testament. And so it's an exciting time, and it requires a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And it's an adventure, and
Oh, it's great.
it's the things that make all the hardship. I feel like the last episode, I didn't go back and listen to it, but I remember what we talked about last year. I feel, especially because I remember where I was at this time last year. I feel like
Right,
those are the things that make the hardships of missions like not worth it, because obviously it's worth it because you're serving God and you're doing what He asked you to do. But it does
right.
balance out just on a day to day practical level. I often
Hmm.
tell people when they say, what's it like? That's a hard question to ask and to answer. And I'm like, well, man, as a
Right.
missionary, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is like that
Mhm.
sometimes. I mean,
I agree.
it's I feel like in America, even when I was serving in ministry, it's like the highs are cool and the lows are not so cool, but it's not as big of a difference as like on the mission field. It's like the highs are really high and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing what the Lord has wanted me to do on the front lines of battle, and it's such a high mountaintop experience. But then the lows, just because of the context, can really drag you down. And it's those kind of adventurous victories of seeing people come to grasp with who God is in the Bible for the first time in their lives that it really does balance that out for you. It maybe keeps
Hmm.
you sane. Maybe that's just a simple way to say
Right,
it,
right. God knows how frail we are and how
Yeah,
much we need just a little bit of encouragement every now and then.
for sure,
So
man.
God
Uh,
brings those things along at just the right time.
hmm I was just in Albania. Well, I don't know when this will air in the summer, but when I'm talking to you, I was just in Albania like 2 weeks ago, visiting Pastor Jeff's ministry. He was there with a couple of guys preaching at a conference, and they were celebrating 30 years of ministry since Jeff
Wow.
went there in the early 90s. And Jeff's been back in America for 15 years now, and the ministry has
Wow.
continued. I think there's 3 churches, and they're planting another, and they're sending out their second missionary. And it's just
Wow.
it's so encouraging for me to see, because it's like if the Lord tarries, that's the goal. That's what I want to see in 30 years.
Hmm.
But I'm learning now, because this is what I would have done in America. But it's like now that I have a disciple, he's young in the faith, and he has no context for church or ministry or even what I want to start. That's the funny part. Like you tell him like, hey,
Hmm.
this is what the goal is. He's like, okay, I don't even know what that means. But and so I was like, come
Right.
with me. Let's fly to Albania. It's an hour flight from Budapest. A lot easier to get there than from America. I was like, come and
Right.
see. I just want you to see the vision, the goal, and see what church is like, see the fellowship of the body. And we were only there for like 3 days, but he was, to see him like be like, wow, this is okay. It was like exciting to him, and to see that. And
Right. That's great.
yeah, man,
That's
I guess I
exactly.
could piggyback that on a question for you, because you're 12 years
Okay.
in.
Yeah.
Where, if the Lord tarries, once you're 20, 30 years into this thing, what would you like to see as the easy answer? Don't give me a cop out. Well, I'd like to see the indigenous churches self-supportive with native pastors. Yeah, okay, I get it. but really, really,
You know that
man,
part.
carnally,
Uh-huh.
spiritually carnal. What would you like to see in a couple decades?
Right. There's a long list. I'll try to give you
Yeah, give them
the
to
most
me.
important things. the One of the things that my heart is really, really burdened for is to see the Kichwa men who, were addicted to sin and to many things, people who have been in the world their entire life, but men who now I've had the privilege of leading to Christ, baptizing them, and I'm seeing them grow in the faith now. I'm discipling them. It would thrill my heart more than anything to see those men become passionate preachers of the gospel. I mean, that just more than anything it would do so much for me.
Yeah.
I'm a passionate preacher of the gospel, but I'm also from another culture. I'm fighting through language issues. I'm there's things I don't understand,
Sure.
and just the concept of being able to send those guys out and trust them just as much as I would trust, a missionary from the States. That's one of the areas we dedicate a lot of time to, to discipleship. And just like you said, taking that guy to Albania, that's exactly what Jesus would have done. He would have spent time with his disciples.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge deal. And so I love that you're doing that. And so we want to see that as far as ministry goes. I want to see, Kichwa men take it seriously and move forward with the ministry. And then as well, discipleship. We love discipleship. We spend a lot of time dedicated to discipleship, and we're seeing a lot of people grow. And we're seeing that realm now of the disciples are making more disciples. We're seeing that happen now.
Praise God.
And so we're
like third generation, I guess, technically, if you're
right,
counting you as the
right.
first. Yeah.
And so my desire would be to see them really fall in love with discipleship and see how important it is, and really take a hold of that and run with that. We got a handful of guys that are already doing that.
That's
I would just love to see God light a fire under that and just see it explode. I love evangelism, but my heart is just always drawn to discipleship. And I don't want to say that to sound like a heretic or something like that, but my heart beats for discipleship. I love seeing people come to faith in Christ. But I have experienced so much in my lifetime of, basically seeing someone come to faith in Christ and then saying, see you later, good luck.
Yeah.
I've seen so much of that,
For sure.
just dropping the ball.
Yeah.
And so my heart I just see so much fruit in that, in discipleship. And so I want to see the people get excited about that and move forward.
And evangelism, I feel like it's super important. Of course, you can't disciple without it. You have to share you have to have new believers to disciple, of course.
Exactly.
But I feel like evangelism is something that can be faked as a Christian, or monetized, or listen, I'm not bashing anyone specifically, but I just think, way back in the day we had traveling evangelists. We didn't have traveling disciplers, though. It's like
That's
I can
true.
roll into a
True.
town and share the gospel with 1,000 people who come to my tent revival, and then, leave town and go do it again. And listen, no judgment here, but I'm just saying the hard work is discipleship. If we're just, and I always work this with people because it's so important, the physical picture that God gives us for evangelism and discipleship. Evangelism is a new birth. It's having babies, right?
Yeah.
And that's the easy part. I know, like, we have to pray, and just like, if you're trying to physically reproduce, you need to pray and ask God, because only God is the giver of life. But parenting is the hard part, and discipleship is parenting, and that takes 18 years, when we're parenting physical children, and really never actually ends. And so, yeah, man, I think you're totally on. I agree with you totally. Evangelism is incredibly important, but I understand what you're getting at, is that, like, not everybody fully gets, even Christians, even missionaries, truly gets the importance of discipleship and
Mm-hmm.
training up guys in the way that they should go. I know we use that verse in Proverbs for kids all the time, but like if your disciple is your spiritual children, then how are you training them up so that when they're old, they shall not depart from it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you,
Right.
man. I think that's so
Mm-hmm.
important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Bible says there in Timothy not to lay hands quickly on any man.
Yeah.
You're referring to pastors, elders,
Yes.
people who are going to take ministries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it's easy in the context of wanting to see numbers, the American context, like we've talked about
Especially
before.
missions, because you get an excited kid.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, okay, let's just ordain them and send them out or something, It's like we need
Right,
elders,
exactly.
we need deacons, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
It
not
would sound
wise.
good in a prayer letter,
It was
So
right.
we've had to learn to slow down, and we've had to learn to really embrace discipleship. And like you said, there's a lot of different types of ministries out there, and you don't want to turn, cynical to anything like that. But as a missionary, I've learned to really, really appreciate other missionaries who take discipleship seriously, who take, being in the pains of birth until I see Christ formed in you. They take those things seriously. Because like you said, people who understand what we're talking about, they're going to understand what we're talking about. The evangelism is the easy part of the two side of things.
I know we glorify it as like a really hard thing, and it is, man. I've not led 1,000 people to the Lord or anything. I get it.
Right.
But that's the thing that if you're just comparing it to the physical picture, it's like it can happen on accident. I mean, I'm not trying to be crude here, but it's like you could literally just be in the right spot at the right time, and God sends a guy. Maybe it's not a what must I do to be saved, but it's like, and that dude gets saved because he was seeking, and God put the man of God in his path. Now, to be fair, I've intentionally started praying that way, that God would send me those guys. But that's just the beginning, though. The rest is like, okay, now how are we going to work through, especially when you're on the field, how are we going to work through whatever it is that you grew up in your culture? How am I going to teach you living to value the Bible's opinion over yours or man's or school, colleges or whatever? That's the hard part, man. When am I going to bring up this sin that's in your life that you don't really fully understand as sin yet, but it is, and we need to deal with it, but we need to deal with it at the right time so that you're ready to handle that. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's the work of a father.
Right.
You have many
really
instructors in Christ, but you have not many fathers, is what Paul says.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It requires dependence on the Holy Spirit, and it, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that can be faked in the Christian life. Evangelism
and in missions,
and of course. I'm learning this more and more, but really just about any ministry in the church, especially public ministry, a lot of that can be falsified.
Yeah.
But discipleship, it cannot be.
No.
Like there's no way to hide whether or not I'm making disciples or not, whether or not the people around me are actually growing to be more like Christ or not.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the ways you really see if someone's really growing spiritually, if they get to the point where they're beginning to make other disciples, and you're seeing that spiritual growth in other people's lives.
Right, exactly. Did they get to the point where they were mature enough to not only see that evangelism is important and they need to take part, but that they're reproducing and they desire to reproduce and to make disciples? Yeah. So can I ask you, in the same vein, but kind of shifting gears a little bit? Last time we talked, we were still really in the heat of the pandemic. Now that we're kind of, at least over here in Europe, we're kind of post-pandemic. There were some, I won't say any keywords, but there were some outside events that maybe helped end things quicker. I don't know.
Exactly.
But where you guys are at, have things kind of settled down, and post-COVID ministry, let's call it that, have things changed for you guys? What's harder? What's easier? Has your strategy changed? What's post-COVID ministry look like for you guys in the Kichwa villages?
I'd say it didn't affect a ton here in the Kichwa villages. It didn't change a lot
because
we just had to kind of slow down a little bit. Right, it's mainly in the big cities. Of course, down in the cities there were rules like masks and things like that, and they like a month ago they finally lifted that rule. I hadn't been in a store without a mask in years, and so it's nice going down a month ago without a mask.
It's like, oh, this is nice.
But I'd say one of the biggest things that we've seen as a change in ministry since COVID is that Kichwa people were very closed to inviting you into their home. That was very, very rare for us to ever go to someone's house. But because of the way COVID happened, and for a little while we had to do ministry, house to house, basically, it kind of opened up people to that idea, to doing house churches and
that's cool.
things along those lines. The very first church we planted, that was my idea. I was like, man, let's just start with a house church. And I just thought that'd be great. And the people here were like, what are you talking about? Like,
wow, yeah.
Why would I invite people into my house? This is crazy. And so we did, our first churches were, under trees and in fields. We would always meet outside somewhere.
Like you had to have a meeting place to get people to
right.
go. I've heard about that in other cultures too. It's like, can't just invite them to your home because it won't go over well.
Right. No. Yeah, you can't do that here. And then of course going, from village to village church planning. Obviously, I live in a village, but I don't live in every village that we work in.
Sure.
And so when I go into a new village, I would have to invite people to someone else's home,
right.
Which is even more awkward.
Right, because it's like it's like I hate the thing how it's like sometimes missionaries, like the first thing they do once they get to the field is like go building shopping, and it's like, come on, guys, like buildings are important resources, but like there's other things to do. But like in this case, when you're working in new villages and you need a meeting place, what if that village is like, I ain't doing a house church? How do you go about that? Or maybe it's easier now since COVID.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier now. People are open to it a little bit more. And so when we go into new villages, what we do is we just work house to house, and we visit, we share the gospel, and we look for people who are interested.
Of course.
And it takes a long time to actually start a church.
Sure.
But what we'll do is we'll have a church for a while. It just won't look like a church.
Yeah.
And we'll go, from house to house. We'll meet in several different houses evangelizing. Mm-hmm. And once we get to the point where there are a few believers and a few people interested, we'll say, hey, let's all meet together and let's go from there. And before that means let's meet under, that tree, or let's meet over there by the river or whatever. Wow. Now the idea is opening up. We can meet in someone's home.
That's cool, man. That's neat.
Makes it a lot easier.
It's actually affecting the culture a little bit.
Right.
Now that's interesting.
It's changed a lot.
Because over here, it's so this is also a colder culture, but for a different reason. It's I can't say Balkan because some people are like, Hungary's not Balkan, but Romania is. So okay, it's the Central Europe, Eastern Europe side of things. The Eastern Bloc countries, and it's just got a coldness to it. And I love the people here, but they're not unkind. They just aren't the Latino culture, of like, someone moves in and you invite them into your house. I mean, I was like, we lived here for 6 months before like a neighbor like said hi to us like verbally, so it's just, so I understand that. But I think unfortunately, and some of my friends as well, I think that COVID has made it worse here. I think that people have, and maybe it's the same because it's even though it's in Central Europe, it's a Western culture, Western, country, EU, American. I think the Western cultures have retreated to their homes, and I think COVID allowed them to do that, and I think they liked it. And now we haven't seen anything, because our ministry is so young, we haven't seen anything specific because the few people that we have tight relationships with. But I'm anticipating that in the future, if things don't go more back to normal, it seems to be a little harder here. I think people are even more private than they were, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But that's really cool to hear that it's actually been providing some open doors for you in the villages. That's really cool.
Right.
Although I'm surprised to hear that the villages were closed too. That blew my mind, man. I assumed that, they say it takes a village to raise a child. I just figured, you're in village ministry. They probably all go to each other's houses all the time.
Right. You would think that, but it's taken us a long time to understand how the people think here, and I still have absolutely no clue, but I'm getting there. One of the things we found out, one of the underlying root causes for that concept of not going house to house is that everybody's mad at everybody. There's a deep bitterness.
Like that small city vibe, small Midwestern city. Everyone knows everyone and hates each other.
You're right. Everybody's dirty laundry's out all the time. And if I go visit this guy, then the other neighbor's going to see me and say, hey, I thought you were on my side. Why are you with him? And it literally, it's unbelievable. I grew up around some of that. I grew up in small southern towns, and I'd seen it my whole life. Mm-hmm. but it's a whole nother level here. It's
Interesting.
completely different in
How many
how
people
serious
live in a village there? I'm sure every village is different, but what are we talking?
right.
100, 1,000 in between?
Hundreds. Yeah,
Okay,
the
okay,
one we're planning the church in now is about 200.
okay, okay, couple hundred people.
Another one we're
Yeah, man. So like everybody
right.
really, literally knows everybody. It's not a
Literally,
phrase.
yeah,
Yeah.
literally, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And the village we're getting ready to start a church in, that one's about 500, but
Hmm.
most of them are around that range. And
Gotcha,
yeah, everybody knows everybody.
man.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's interesting.
That's cool that you've got some more open doors though, as far as like doing some Bible studies in houses. That's kind of what we're
Yeah,
working right now. Just like the people who are interested, some saved, some not. Just we had our first official, not official. I mean, it wasn't a church service, but we had an Easter quote unquote service at our flat, and I played some songs in
yeah,
Hungarian on the guitar. I preached a short message in English, but threw in some Hungarian as I'm learning, and
yeah.
all with completely unchurched people, man, who never. And it was just,
Awesome.
dude, it was one of the biggest spiritual highs I've ever had in my life, because it was
Right.
like
I
this
bet.
only happened because God has been working, man. Because I've done
Hmm.
nothing other than just like pray really hard that He sends the right people and I don't screw it up, man. So,
Right. That's
man,
a great prayer.
praise God, man. It's the foundation. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we had a man. Teams are starting to visit, man. Which is so weird for us because the first year we were here, we didn't have anyone visit because of COVID. But now you have people like, hey, we're doing a missions trip in Europe. Can we stop by and see you for a day or two? I'm like, what? Yeah, come on over. That's awesome. I can show you
Yeah,
our
of course.
neighborhood. And we had a team from a Midtown Baptist Temple in Kansas City, Missouri, 6 or 8 young people. And they're asking, like, what does a missionary do all day? And like, that's a valid question.
Right.
You don't know. I didn't know before I asked somebody, it doesn't offend me. And then you just
Right.
tell 'em, man, we're in the foundational stages, and that it's tough. If you think about building a building, the if you've ever watched, because I got to help us build a youth building at our church in Ohio, and the planning stages takes forever. The foundation, digging, leveling the ground and digging the footers and pouring the footers takes forever. But then once the things start going up, it goes up quick. And it's like you
Right.
just have to get the foundation right, and you can't rush it. You have to do the foundation right. And that's where we're at right
Hmm.
now, man. We've just been plowing the field and working the soil and preparing those footers, so that we can,
Hmm.
in a year or two, when the church starts actually, you know, being built and is official, things can actually go a lot quicker.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, it makes sense.
But it requires a lot of
I-
patience and diligence, and I don't know that a lot of young prospective missionaries realize that, especially if you're going out
oh yeah.
somewhere and you're not joining, because we didn't join a veteran missionary when we first. I've met one along the way now who has been a tremendous help, but it's not like we just went and joined a guy and I was his assistant for 2 years until he sent me out. So I think you did something similar
Mhm.
too. I mean, you just went. You moved to the big city for a minute for language learning, but then kind of on your own at
Right.
that point. So it's just a lot of
Mhm.
patience and diligence and just
Mhm.
push forward.
Yeah. 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 You have to have a lot of patience, and you have to, uh, you kind of get used to there will be people along the way who say, "Why aren't you moving faster?"
Mm,
In other words, they don't say it that way, but
sure,
where's
sure,
the
yeah.
fruit?
Hmm.
But I think you, as a missionary, God's placed a calling on your heart, and you know what the need is there, and you know exactly what that looks like, and you in a sense you have an understanding of how long that's going to take.
Mm,
And the missionary who's willing to stick it out is the one who sees the fruit long term.
sure.
It may be 30, 40 years if the Lord tarries that long, and we may see something big at that point. Maybe, if that's
Hmm.
in God's plans, but the
Hmm.
bottom line is my
Might
job is
not.
to lay the foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eh,
exactly.
I mean, I can
Hmm.
think of lots of
May not.
missionaries of antiquity who didn't get to see the fruit, but they laid the foundation for the
Right.
next guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
exactly. I think that's the best mentality to have to go into missions is to, I mean, there's a place for short-term missions and there's a place
hmm.
for mission trips,
Of course.
but I think for the most part, I think the best way to go into missions is go into it as a career,
Hmm.
knowing that this is what God has called me to long
Yeah.
term, and I'm here to stay as long as it takes,
Hmm.
and as much or as little fruit as I see, I'm willing to stick it out because
Hmm.
in the end, I'm not trying to accomplish something for God. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm approved in Christ. I have
Hmm.
everything that I need. God has blessed me, and God has
Hmm.
saved me and loved me. And so I don't, it's not that I'm trying to convince him of something or accomplish something for him. It's just
Yeah.
he's given me a gift to
Yeah.
serve in ministry, and that's all I can do is
Well,
just
and
serve.
it's going back to 2 Timothy 2, since we're talking about the discipleship, 2 Timothy 2:2 is the discipleship verse, where Paul
Right.
commends Timothy to take what he's been given and teach it to faithful men who will teach others also. But then it's like verse 3 and 4, a lot of people just stop, and I'm like, dude, verse 3 then goes on to say, you're a soldier, so endure hardness, therefore, verse 2, since you're going to do discipleship, endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. And then verse 4, in the context of discipleship, no man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who has called him to be a soldier. So it's, like you said,
Right.
it's all about the perspective of this is why I'm doing it, not to earn his love, but to please him who called me to do it. And I think for myself, when there are the struggle times or the hard days, it's just making sure I readjust my focus on the judgment seat, on Colossians 3, things above, and just, it's like, no, I'm doing this for a reason. It's not even necessarily for the rewards of this life. It's banking on the rewards, sending him forward into the next life, and more importantly, that we get to please him. We see him at the judgment seat and hopefully make him proud.
Right. Right. Absolutely. It's the best mentality to have, in missions. I think it helps us to stick it out when times get hard and when things are slower than we want them to be.
Do you
I think it
remember
helps us.
when you were in the foundational years of, because I know that you went to the big city first and then made your way out to the villages, so yours was a different process than ours has been so far. Do you remember ever being frustrated with just the timing of things, or like feeling like it's moving too slow, and not necessarily mad at God, but like, man, am I doing something wrong? Should I be doing something else because it's not moving fast? Can you recount any of those times or feelings?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I felt like I was completely worthless in so many different ways.
Well,
as
I
we were
didn't want to say the word, but yeah, I can identify.
right. I mean, yeah. Honestly, I mean, those first couple of years, it was tough. We were working in the city, but it was a new church plant there, and it was a long story, but the missionary, there was health problems going on, and so he was in and out, and I had opportunities to minister, but it was more like only when there was a hole. It wasn't like I was actually moving forward with the ministry. I wasn't seeing things happen. I was kind of just kind of keeping the church afloat, basically.
Yeah.
And in my heart was in the villages. We were just trying to get into the villages, and we could not get an open door. There were no missionaries here. We had no context. And so it was a long time of waiting. And I did things I shouldn't have done. I looked for opportunities. I tried to open doors myself.
Yeah.
And it
no,
ended up,
I totally understand.
right. Yeah. I ended up
Because
making
you
some bad
feel like you
decisions,
also
but-
have to justify why you're there, not just in newsletters,
Exactly.
but it's like, man, I've got little old ladies back in America giving their 2 mites from their fixed income. I gotta do something, and
Right.
it can be hard to
Right.
balance that with waiting on the Lord
Yeah.
at the same time.
I agree 100%. Those are the times you really need a veteran missionary in your life, even if he's not right there, but someone you can
Yeah.
talk to on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
That helps you see this is the foundational part of missions. God could have chosen to do missions a different way, but he chose to do it in this kind of way. And what it looks like right now is that a foreigner goes into a place where there is no gospel presence, or there is no active church planting in some area. And we have to learn everything it means to live there and work there and speak there. And we have to raise all the money. And that means people making huge sacrifices so that I can buy food and I can take my wife out to dinner. And so I can, survive on the mission
Buy
field.
shoes for my
And all
kid
that is part of the
because his
process.
feet grows every month at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. Wait till he's 14. Right?
Oh gosh, man. Yeah.
Just eat you out of house and home. I mean,
Oh man.
and that's all. It's all part of God's perfect plan and
Yeah.
perfect purpose. And it's a long journey, but it's an exciting journey.
Yeah. Man, since we're on this topic, can I ask you, we are, I don't know if you've heard this or not. We haven't really made at the recording of this, we haven't really made a formal announcement or anything, but we're, by the time this airs, we'll have told more people. It's not a secret, but we're pregnant, with our second one.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's exciting.
Not quite halfway, so we don't know the gender or anything yet. I keep saying this because I got to talk to the audience at the recording of this. We don't know the gender yet, but that, that's putting us at, we're going to have the baby in America. So there is going to be a visit to the States at some point. And that's going to be our first visit to the States, and it's going to be around the 2-year mark, which was our plan and our goal all along when we left, and was the advice of Jeff, who's my pastor and veteran missionary, and a couple of people I've talked to. It's like, man, if you can spend almost, give or take, around 2 years before you come back home, it'd be really good for you. And it has been, but we've also gone through so much as a family and individuals, and our church. Of course, the ministry goes on. Our sending church, ministry goes on. And our sending church is from my hometown, dude. I grew up there for 30 years before leaving. I grew up in that church for 30 years before leaving. And, man, I'm nervous. I can't explain it. Like, some people, they would think you're just excited. I am. I'm excited to see people. But I'm also just kind of nervous, man, because I'm a different person. My family's different. I know that my town and my church will be a little bit different. And it's just like, I don't know what it is. I've got a little bit of nerves, and we haven't, at this point, there's no plane tickets booked. We're just anticipating that we're going to be visiting again. And when we first came here, there was no, other than a 2-year mark, there was no end in sight as far as visiting back home for the first time.
Right.
And it's like the first time for me just seems so substantial, because after that, it's like, if I need to fly back for a week for a missions conference, that's fine. But the first time, we haven't had a Christmas in America since 2019. When we moved to the field, our son was 2. Now he's 4. He spent almost half of his life here. I don't know, man. Am I weird? Like, why? I don't even know what I'm asking you. Why do I feel this way? Am I wrong? Like, can you help me? You're my shrink right now. Like, what? What do I do?
Well, I'll answer the most recent question. Yes, you are weird. That's number one. Yes.
Thank you.
No, just kidding. No,
well, we're missionaries, so we're all weird.
we're all in that category, I guess. No, we honestly we have felt that, and we still feel that when we go. Wow. We feel that every single time. And you don't know what things are going to look like. You don't know what people are going to ask you. That biggest fear is always. I don't have it as much now because a lot more things have happened in ministry, but those first few trips back, I was dreading the question, how many members are in your church? How big is your church? What is, how many people got saved last week? How many hundreds of people got saved last week? I'm just dreading those questions. Yeah. And sure enough, I go, and some dear little old lady, of course, she loves the Lord, but
loves the Lord. Prays for you, guaranteed,
Right. She prays for us. She loves us. But, it's just, there's just a mentality there of we want to see numbers. We want to see things happen.
And they haven't seen you for a long time. So it's like, man, you must be killing it out there,
Exactly. Yeah. You must have 5 churches by now.
Wow.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of fear of that. And one of the things is funny. I just recently talked to Laura about this, my wife. I feel like over the last few years, we've gone through a lot of suffering and a lot of loss. We've talked a little bit about it, I think, on the podcast a couple of times. It's been a long couple of years, and we're going on about 3 years now. Just kind of one thing after another that the Lord has brought into our life to refine us. And I'm telling you, I ought to be pure by now. I'm wondering when the refining process is going to stop.
Like, are we done now?
Right. I don't know how bright I can get, but going through that process has changed me as a person. Deeply, obviously, spiritually. Praise the Lord, it needed to happen. The Lord has changed me deeply. But I mean, even just my personality, everything about me is different. I don't laugh as much as I used to. I don't, and I'm filled with joy. It's nothing like that. It's just there's a different seriousness on my heart right now, and I think it's just because of everything that's been on our hearts for the last 2 years and 3 years. And so I told my wife, that's one of my fears when we're in the States. There's a lot of big personalities in the States. And there's a lot of the pastors that support us, just real big personalities, and they get in the pulpit and it's just like, here I am. And I get in the pulpit and I feel like I'm not even allowed to be here. I feel
like you don't
belong. I don't know, it's just almost different. Right. And then And then the Kichwa culture as well is very reserved. Like people don't get loud and excited, and they don't, they're not the life of the party. No one's the life of the party here. It's just everybody's real quiet.
So
And so I've becoming that kind of a
you,
person.
you do
And so when
belong
I go there,
exactly where
I'm
God
worried,
has you. Yeah.
right? I worry about those, comparisons, and boy, that missionary, boy, he's weird. He sure is a bump on a log. He doesn't talk much, or he doesn't.
Right.
Anyway, so
And
I
you think
have those same
about
kind of
those
fears as well.
things. Yeah. I mean, for
Mm,
people listening, if, obviously if you're listening to this, you're interested in missions, even if you're not a missionary or prospective missionary, you're just a churchgoer, you must like missions at some level. And, when these are things, when missionaries roll into town for, if it's a missions conference or if it's just a visit and update kind of a service at a prayer service or a Sunday morning, like, we think about those things, man. You want people to like you. But you're different now. So you've spent 12 years in Ecuador. You're Ecuadorian or what, and I don't know the adjective
right.
form of Ecuador, but you
You got it
are
right.
more that than American, at least culturally. And it's like my
Hmm.
son, man. He's lived almost half his life in Hungary. And so even though his Hungarian isn't perfect, I mean, he's a 4-year-old. His English sucks too, but as far as that goes. But I mean,
Hmm.
he's more Hungarian now than he was, and you just feel yourself changing, and that's a good point, man. I think I'm just. I don't know. I don't think I could pinpoint anything, but I know that I've changed. I know that my family's changed. And I know that when I go back home's not the same way I left it either. And so it's just like
Right.
so much change on
Hmm.
both ends just worries me. But of course we're also excited to see so many people and to update with what's going on in our lives. But
Oh yeah,
yeah, I was just curious
absolutely.
to your thoughts on that.
I remember, if I could tell you real quick, I
Yeah,
remember my wife and I, one of our first trips back, we went to a restaurant. I think it was a Moe's, if I remember right.
Moe's down south, huh?
Like yeah, down south, of
Moe's or
course. Yeah.
Zaxby's?
Zaxby's. Oh man, Zaxby's is good.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I would take Zaxby's over Moe's too. Yeah,
Right. I'll take
but
Zaxby's.
Raising Cane's over both of them. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. the Anyway, we go into this restaurant, and there's this drink machine, and it's this big red thing, and it's got a touch screen on it.
Oh, bro,
I
when
don't
they
know if you've
brought the
seen them.
touchscreen Coca-Cola machines in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my word, yes. Yeah, we were completely lost. We didn't know
Wow.
what to do. We're just standing in front of this thing like,
Like,
what on
what?
earth is this? You
Wow.
know? And people are looking at us like, aren't you from here? Like, you're very obviously from here. What's the problem? And
You don't
so
look like a foreigner.
there's
You
things
don't
like
sound
that.
like a foreigner.
Right. But yeah, we've had plenty of those experiences.
Man, and you know what though? I think it's a good sign too because it's proving that so at least for me, the goal was to be here about 2 years before we went back for our first trip, and for not for everybody that's not always possible. So I'm not like if you are a missionary and that you went home earlier than that for your first trip, like I'm not knocking it. That was just our goal and the advice that we had gotten. And for me and even my wife, I've asked her about this. I said, like, if we had the opportunity to like visit sooner, would you have wanted to, or would you have been ready? And we both were like, I don't think I would have been ready, man. Like I've needed this time to
Mm.
kind of separate because it was just hard to leave, especially some missionaries, they go to different churches or they went to Bible college, were sent out of a church they didn't grow up in or anything like that. But like our situation, it was just hard, man. It was just hard to leave, hard for anyone to leave. And so
Right.
I think we've just needed this time to make this place home. And so we feel it
Mhm.
now. Like this is home. My son goes to school here. His friends are here. I know our neighborhood. We have some disciples and we have friends, and it's going to be harder to go back to the States now.
Mhm.
Than it would be to stay here. And I think that's a good sign because it's like you think about like all our
Mhm.
stuff is here and you're thinking of like the logistics of like, man, we're gonna be guests in America. We're gonna be
Mhm.
visitors, which is strange to think, but I think we
Yeah.
needed that time to get to that place and that mindset. And so
Mhm.
I'm very excited in that regard because I think it's gonna be a healthy visit for us and our
Mhm.
families.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree absolutely. I think every missionary, like you said, every situation is different,
Hmm.
and a lot of it depends on what kind of context you're serving in, on the field, and a lot of it depends on too if you have missionaries around you. There's a lot of different things that affect how often you should go,
Sure.
and man, all of those details. But it's good to have other missionaries in your life that can help you
Yeah.
see that. As a young missionary, it's hard to know,
Sure.
but having some veteran missionaries around you, they can really help guide.
Yeah. Because it's also easy to just, like, as a young missionary, be like, you know what, man, I'm just sticking it out, nose to the grindstone. I'm going to die at 29 like David Brainerd or Robert Murray McShane. Like, I'm just, and then you talk to your older friends who've been doing it for, there's a guy here that, named Mark, who's been here for 30 years in Hungary, who I found, God led into my life, and he's been a huge help. I've got Jeff Bartell, Paul Clark's a guy in Colombia who's been huge for me. You've been a huge help since before we got here. And when I talk to you guys, it's often like, what are you doing? Like, like take your family on vacation, take a couple days off. And it gives you, I don't know if you can remember, like as a younger guy, you're like, this is my job. I can't take time off. I can't just go to a vacation for a week. Like that's what my mind thought, and it's like, I need those older guys to be like, no, man, like you still have your family and you still need to take care of yourself and your body, and obviously spiritually you need to be spend time with the Lord, but I mean, even emotionally. And so it's always good to be reminded of that, because when you're on your own, it can be like, nose to the grindstone, no looking up. If you have feelings, squash them. You got rest of eternity to have feelings, like I can feel when I die or whatever,
Right.
But it's like, but really though, it's like, no, you got to take care of yourself, take care of your family. And even visiting, it's not always selfish, because even Paul went to visit the churches and let them know how things were going, so that's important too.
Right.
But yeah,
We had
you said,
a veteran missionary here in Ecuador tell us one time, jokingly, but he said this is how you can tell when you need a break. He said, when you start liking the potato chips, it's time for a break, because the potato chips are strange here. I don't know what it is, but they're strange.
That's
and
funny,
he said, so you'll come to the point over time where you have to eat them. People give them to you, and it'll come to the point where you're like, that's kind of good. You're like, all right, now it's time for a break. You need to step away.
That's funny, because there's they have tons of potato chips here too that are all the strangest flavors, and there's a few normal ones. There's like the sour cream and onion. You're like, okay, I can do that. But there's this cheese flavored one, which isn't weird because there's cheese flavored chips in America. But this cheese flavored chip tastes like butt. It just does, man. It's and my wife and my son love it, and I'm like,
oh no,
I don't know what's wrong with you guys, or maybe that's good that you guys are.
It's time for a break.
Yeah. But man, dude, let me just say as we wrap up here, I thank you for being one of the guys that I can talk to and get advice from, bounce things off. I appreciate that you're willing to be so candid and open on microphone too. I know a lot of guys don't feel that comfort as missionaries, and I understand why too. So thanks for being that guy and being Absolutely. A guy that I can talk to once or twice a year, and it's like you're picking up from the last time.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me, man. It's been good talking with you again, and man, it makes me look forward to having these conversations like this, knowing what that's going to be like to not have to break and not have to only talk once a year, just to be able to have this kind of fellowship. So I appreciate you putting this together, and I appreciate you giving me a call.
Of course, man. I hope that someday, we'll see what happens. Maybe someday we'll actually get to meet on the same continent, like in person. It would be cool, man. I don't remember the last time I saw you in person. It might have been that first missions conference that you were at FBC years ago. Not sure.
Yeah, maybe so. It's been a while.
Yeah. But
we'll have to work that out one day.
Yeah. Hey, man, if I don't see you in person, I'll see you in the clouds. All right.
Sounds good. I'll be there.
Thanks again, bro.
All right, man. It's good talking with you.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Like I said at the beginning there, I really did catch Will off guard because I just started recording, but I love talking to Will. He's such a good brother and a good missionary, and honestly, he's just been one of those guys that since we started deputation and ended up on the field, he's been a guy that I can confide in, a guy that I can ask him for advice, and with no judgment. And if you can find a brother, a mentor, a friend like that, that's a really valuable thing to have. So I value Will in so many ways. I hope you guys enjoyed that kind of candid conversation that didn't really have any specific theme to it. I'll certainly try to pick one out for the title of this episode, but I hope it was encouraging to you, and I hope that you learned something from it. Thank you guys so much for listening to Missionary Roundtable. We will see you back here, same time, same place next week. Have a good one. God bless.
Thanks for listening. Please rate and subscribe and share us on social media. Also, please make sure to check out our other podcast, Theology Roundtable, at theologyroundtable.com.